I used to believe nothing truly irreversible could happen under chandeliers. Our family gala was designed to preserve appearances, not destroy them. It was polished, predictable, suffocatingly elegant. Every year I wore a different designer gown, shook the same manicured hands, smiled for the same society pages. But the night I saw her, something shifted in me so quietly, I didn't understand it until it was too late. By the end of that evening, I had fallen in love and unknowingly stepped into a war inside my own home. Before I take you inside that night, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I read more of them than you think, and I like knowing where these stories land. My name is Charlotte Whitmore. I'm 32 years old, the only daughter of a Boston financial dynasty that built its fortune in shipping and private equity. I sit on boards I never wanted to join and attend benefits I never asked to host. I paint in secret, abstract oils no one in my family has ever seen, and I've built a reputation as the Whitmore who will never marry, not because I don't believe in love, but because I don't trust arrangements disguised as romance. My father passed away 6 years ago. My stepmother, Evelyn Whitmore, inherited not only his shares, but his social throne. Elegant, strategic, immaculately composed, she runs our estate like a monarchy. The gala is her crown jewel. Held every September at our restored 19th century mansion in Newport, it gathers senators, art patrons, hedge fund heirs, and the kind of women my stepmother subtly approves for me. That night, the lawn was lit with floating lanterns, string quartets drifting through the open French doors. I wore midnight silk, hair pulled back, diamonds I hadn't chosen. I was already planning my early exit when I saw her standing near the terrace bar. She didn't look uncomfortable, which was unusual. Most guests either overperformed or underdressed. She did neither. She wore a black gown, simple, fluid, no obvious label, and held a glass of champagne like she was thinking rather than posing. Dark hair brushed one shoulder, no desperation in her posture, no calculation in her smile. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. She assessed me. That was new. I approached her because I was bored. That's the lie I told myself later. In truth, something in her steadiness pulled me in. Enjoying the spectacle? I asked, glancing toward the dance floor where donors were congratulating themselves for philanthropy that cost them nothing. She let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. It's impressive, she said. All this money pretending to be humility. Her voice was low, grounded, not mocking, observant. I felt my mouth curve before I could stop it. We talked for 15 minutes before I realized I hadn't introduced myself properly. She already knew who I was, everyone did, but she didn't treat it like currency. Charlotte, I said finally, offering my hand. She shook it, firm and warm. Sophia, she replied. Just Sophia, no last name. I should have asked. I didn't. Instead, I asked her to dance. The quartet shifted into something slower. Not romantic exactly, but intimate enough. When I placed my hand at her waist, she didn't flinch. Her fingers rested lightly against my shoulder blade, and for a moment the entire lawn blurred behind her. I became acutely aware of the line of her collarbone, the faint scent of citrus and something warmer. We moved easily, like we'd done it before. "You don't seem like you belong here," she murmured, eyes steady on mine. "I don't," I answered, surprising myself with the honesty. That was when the shift happened, not dramatic, not explosive. Just a tightening in my chest, as if something long dormant had opened its eyes. I had dated women before, discreetly, safely. But with Sophia there was no calculation, no pre-written exit. When the song ended, we didn't separate immediately. My thumb brushed her waist without thinking. She inhaled softly. I felt the invitation in it. "Walk with me," I said. We slipped past the crowd toward the back gardens where the noise softened. The ocean air carried salt and autumn. I could hear laughter behind us, the faint clink of glasses, but it felt distant. Under the shadow of climbing ivy, I turned toward her fully. "You didn't tell me who invited you," I said. It was half teasing, half curiosity. She held my gaze for a beat too long. "I'm here because I'm supposed to be," she replied. A strange answer. I didn't press. Instead, I leaned in. The first kiss wasn't rushed. It began with breath, with proximity. With a question in my eyes, she answered without speaking. Her lips were warm, deliberate, not hesitant, not greedy. When my hand slid from her waist to the small of her back, she pulled me closer, just enough to make the world tilt. I forgot about donors and expectations and my stepmother's watchful perimeter. I forgot that nothing irreversible was supposed to happen under chandeliers. When we parted, it wasn't embarrassment that filled the space between us. It was recognition. Something undeniable had begun. I didn't know her last name. I didn't know why she was there. I didn't know that by the end of the week I would see her standing in my stepmother's private office, not as a guest, not as a mystery, but as an employee whose livelihood depended on the very family I had just complicated. That night, all I knew was that for the first time in years, I wasn't performing. I was choosing. The next morning, I woke up with salt still clinging to my memory, and the ghost of Sophia's lips lingering like a secret under my skin. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe she had simply been a guest, someone orbiting our world from a safe distance, someone I could call without consequence. I checked my phone before my feet even touched the floor. No message, no unknown number. I hadn't asked for it. That realization landed with an irritation I couldn't fully justify. By noon, I was back at the estate. Newport in daylight feels less enchanted and more architectural. Stone, iron gates, manicured hedges that require staff to maintain illusions. Evelyn had requested my presence in her office to review donor commitments. She never wastes time the day after the gala. Optics must be secured before gossip can grow roots. I walked in still thinking about Sophia's hand sliding into mine in the garden. Evelyn sat behind my father's mahogany desk, posture impeccable, silver silk blouse perfectly tailored. She glanced up briefly. "You left early," she observed. It was an accusation. It was data collection. "I stayed long enough," I replied. She gave me a small, unreadable smile. "One must stay until the right eyes have seen you." The door behind me opened. I turned casually at first, and then my breath stalled in my throat. Sophia stepped inside carrying a leather portfolio. Dressed in tailored charcoal slacks and a crisp white blouse, her hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp line of her jaw. Professional, composed, not a guest, not uncertain. She stopped short when she saw me, but the reaction lasted less than a second. Her expression reset into neutrality. "Miss Whitmore," she said evenly. Evelyn didn't look up from her tablet. "Sophia handles internal administrative coordination for my office. She'll be organizing the foundation's seasonal accounts." She finally lifted her gaze toward me, studying the flicker she must have noticed cross my face. "I trust you've met." The question was surgical. Sophia answered before I could. "Briefly, at the gala." Her tone was steady, not intimate, not distant. Controlled. I felt heat crawl up my neck, not from embarrassment, but from the sudden recalibration of power. She hadn't been vague the night before. She had told me she was there because she was supposed to be. I simply hadn't understood what that meant. Evelyn clasped her hands lightly. "Sophia has been invaluable this quarter. Discreet. Efficient." The emphasis on that word was intentional. Discreet. A reminder, perhaps, or a warning. Sophia approached the desk to lay down financial summaries. When she passed close to me, the faint citrus scent reached me again, and for a reckless half-second, I remembered the ivy wall and her mouth against mine. My fingers twitched at my side. She didn't look at me. The meeting continued as if nothing irreversible had happened 12 hours earlier. Numbers, pledges, endowments. I contributed where necessary, but my attention fractured each time Sophia spoke. Her voice remained measured, precise. She was good, more than good. She wasn't someone hired to fetch or assist casually. She was integrated into Evelyn's inner operations. When the meeting ended, Evelyn dismissed her first. "We'll reconvene after lunch," she said smoothly. Sophia nodded and moved toward the door. "Charlotte," Evelyn added before I could follow. "Stay." I remained standing while the door closed behind Sophia. Silence stretched thin. Evelyn leaned back slightly. You looked surprised. She folded her hands. Is there something you'd like to tell me? The directness was almost impressive. No, I replied calmly. Her eyes lingered on mine, searching for missteps. Be mindful of appearances, she said finally. We rely on the steadiness of this household. There it was. She didn't need details. She sensed shifts instinctively. I left the office with my pulse unsettled and found Sophia in the side corridor near the records room. She was alone, reviewing a stack of invoices. For a moment, I watched her unnoticed. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way her brow creased in concentration. The image of her laughing softly under lantern light felt impossibly intimate compared to this controlled version. Sophia. She looked up, composed as ever. Miss Whitmore. Charlotte. I corrected quietly. A flicker of something crossed her face. Not vulnerability, but awareness. This isn't appropriate, she said softly. Inappropriate would have been lying, I replied. You didn't. I also didn't clarify. You told me you were supposed to be there. She held my gaze. Because I was. The air between us tightened. No music, no ocean breeze, just polished floors and the faint hum of the estate's ventilation system. Why didn't you tell me you worked for her? I asked. Because at the gala, she said carefully. I wasn't working. The distinction mattered. It wasn't deception. It was compartmentalization. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. And now? She swallowed, barely perceptible. Now I am. The proximity was different in daylight. Sharper, edged with consequence. I could feel the pull again, steady and undeniable. My hand almost lifted toward her waist before I caught myself. You kissed me, I said quietly. Her eyes darkened. You kissed me. That subtle correction made my breath hitch. Was it a mistake? I asked. She hesitated. Not long, but enough to reveal the weight. It was complicated. I don't want complicated, I said. A faint, ironic smile touched her lips. Then you don't want me. The truth in that sentence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like a challenge. Footsteps echoed faintly from the far hall. Sophia stepped back first, restoring space. We should keep distance, she said. Your stepmother trusts me. I won't jeopardize that. And if I don't care? I asked. Her gaze softened, just slightly. You will. She walked past me then, steady, controlled, leaving behind the same quiet tremor she had planted the night before. I stood alone in the corridor, realizing two things at once. First, what I felt hadn't dimmed under fluorescent light. Second, my stepmother's employee had just become the most dangerous person in my world. I told myself I could handle proximity, that I had grown up in rooms full of tension disguised as etiquette, that I understood power dynamics better than anyone. But proximity to Sophia wasn't like navigating donors or board members. It was physical, immediate. It lived in the space between us like static waiting for contact. The estate was large enough to avoid someone intentionally, which meant fate had nothing to do with how often I ran into her that week. Morning briefings in Evelyn's office, afternoon reviews in the library, a quiet exchange of documents in the hall outside the conservatory. Each time we behaved impeccably. Each time, my pulse betrayed me. On Thursday, I found her alone in the East Wing archive room. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, dust suspended in quiet air. She was standing on a small ladder, reaching for a labeled storage box. The line of her body, long, balanced, struck me with inconvenient force. You're avoiding me, I said. She didn't look down immediately. I'm working. That's not the same thing. She stepped off the ladder carefully and faced me. It is when you're my employer's stepdaughter. There it was again. Structure, hierarchy. The thing I'd spent years pretending didn't apply to me. You're not my employee, I said evenly. I work for your household, she corrected. That's close enough. I moved closer without thinking. You didn't feel distant in the garden. Her jaw tightened slightly. That was before. Before what? Before I had to consider the consequences. I stopped a foot away from her, close enough to feel warmth, not close enough to touch. You think I'd let something happen to your position? Her eyes met mine, steady and sharp. You don't have to let it happen. It just has to look wrong. The truth of that irritated me because it was accurate. Appearances were currency in our world. And Evelyn understood exchange rates better than anyone. I don't regret kissing you, I said quietly. Silence settled between us, not awkward, but charged. Neither do I, she admitted. The honesty landed deeper than I expected. I lifted my hand slowly this time, giving her space to move away if she chose to. She didn't. My fingers brushed the inside of her wrist, warm skin, steady pulse. Her breath shifted. A small change. Enough. This is a mistake, she whispered. Then tell me to leave. She didn't. The second kiss wasn't soft like the first. It wasn't exploratory. It was contained urgency finally allowed oxygen. I backed her gently against the edge of the long wooden table, one hand at her waist, the other sliding up along her spine. She made a small sound, barely audible, that traveled straight through me. For a moment, I forgot the house, the staff, the structure of inherited control. Her hands found my shoulders, then the back of my neck, fingers threading into my hair. The pull was deliberate, claiming without hesitation. When we broke apart, our foreheads rested together, breath mingling. This can't be routine, she said softly. It isn't. Then what is it? I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound reckless. Instead, I kissed her again, slower this time. My hand slipped from her waist to the curve of her hip. She shivered faintly under my touch, but didn't retreat. Her fingers traced the line of my collarbone, then down to the neckline of my blouse. Footsteps echoed somewhere distant in the hall. We froze. The estate had a way of reminding you it was never empty. Sophia stepped back first, adjusting her blouse with practiced composure. This is exactly what I meant, she said quietly. One wrong angle, one wrong door opening. I watched her restore professional distance like armor sliding back into place. It frustrated me. Not because she was right, but because she could compartmentalize faster than I could. Dinner, I said suddenly. Her brows lifted slightly. Excuse me? Dinner. Not here. Not near this house. Somewhere neutral. She hesitated. I'm not asking for secrecy, I added. I'm asking for clarity. And if someone sees us, they'll assume I'm allowed to see whoever I want. She gave me a look that was almost amused. You're used to immunity, are you? The question lingered between us. Finally, she exhaled slowly. One dinner. Relief spread through me in a way that felt dangerously close to hope. Text me the address, she added. Not from the house line. I smiled faintly. You're more strategic than you let on. I work for your stepmother, she said. I have to be. The mention of Evelyn cooled the heat in the room just slightly. A reminder that we were moving inside a structure she controlled. Before leaving, Sophia paused at the doorway. Charlotte. Yes? If this becomes something real, it won't be quiet. I didn't hesitate this time. Good. She held my gaze for one long beat, then disappeared into the corridor. That night, as I drove back to my Boston apartment, I replayed every touch, every restrained breath. I should have felt caution. Instead, I felt anticipation. What I didn't realize yet was that someone else had begun paying attention. And Evelyn Whitmore never missed a shift in the air. The restaurant I chose was far enough from Newport to feel anonymous, but close enough to avoid suspicion. A quiet place on the edge of Providence where no one from our circle lingered long enough to observe patterns. Low light, exposed brick, the muted clink of glasses. The kind of place where conversation stayed between the people having them. I arrived early and sat near the back, telling myself it was practicality rather than anticipation. When Sophia walked in, the room shifted in the subtle way spaces do when the right person enters. She wore dark jeans and a fitted black sweater, hair loose this time, softer than the professional severity I'd grown used to inside the estate. For a moment she stood near the entrance scanning the room, and the small crease of concentration between her brows stirred something protective in me. When her eyes found mine, the tension eased. You picked well, she said, as she slid into the chair across from me. I like being somewhere no one knows my last name. That must be rare. Not rare enough. A server came and went. Wine arrived. Conversations started carefully, not because we lacked interest, but because neither of us wanted to pretend the situation was simple. "I grew up outside Worcester," she said after a while. "My mother still lives there. You help support her," I said. She gave me a measuring look. "You remember details. I pay attention. Most people in your world don't." Her words weren't bitter, just factual. I leaned back slightly. "Most people in my world don't see beyond themselves. And you do?" "I'm trying." The honesty felt exposed in a way I hadn't expected. Sophia studied me for a moment longer before looking down at her glass. "You know what worries me?" she said quietly. "What?" "That this is exciting for you because it's different." The sentence landed with uncomfortable precision. "This isn't novelty," I said. "How do you know?" "Because I still felt the imprint of her hands hours after we parted. Because I had never counted minutes waiting for someone to arrive. Because the estate had felt emptier since she left each day." "I know," I said simply. Something in her expression softened. Not surrender, but trust beginning to form along fragile edges. Dinner stretched longer than either of us planned. We talked about work, about art, about the quiet expectations that shape lives long before we recognize them. She told me about building stability piece by piece. Scholarships, part-time jobs, years of refusing shortcuts that came with hidden costs. I told her about inherited responsibility and the strange loneliness of privilege that comes with constant observation. By the time the check came, the air between us felt warmer, steadier. Outside, the night had cooled, streetlights cast long gold shadows across the pavement. For a moment, we stood facing each other without speaking, the silence comfortable rather than uncertain. "I meant what I said," she told me. "About consequences. I know. And you're still here. I will be." Her eyes searched mine as if measuring whether that promise came from impulse or conviction. I reached for her hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. Her fingers curled into mine with quiet certainty. The contact felt deeper than our kisses had. Not more intense, but more grounded. Less like ignition, more like continuity. "You make this difficult," she said softly. "I make it honest." A small breath escaped her. I stepped closer, drawn by instinct more than decision. My free hand came to rest lightly at her waist. Even through the knit fabric of her sweater, I felt warmth radiating into my palm. She tilted her head slightly, eyes steady on mine. This kiss unfolded differently than the others. Slower, intentional. The kind of kiss that belongs to people learning each other, rather than discovering each other. Her lips parted beneath mine with quiet ease, and the hand holding mine tightened almost imperceptibly. When I pulled her closer, she came willingly, her body aligning with mine in a way that felt natural rather than urgent. The world beyond the circle of streetlight receded. My thumb traced the curve of her jaw. She leaned into the touch, eyes closing briefly before opening again. "You're dangerous," she murmured. "I thought you already decided that." Her lips brushed mine again, softer this time, almost thoughtful. Eventually we separated, though neither of us stepped far. "I should go," she said. "So should I." Neither of us moved. Finally, she let go of my hand, though her fingers lingered a second longer than necessary. "Charlotte." "Yes?" "If this ends badly, it won't." She gave me a small look, half skepticism, half something warmer. "You can't know that." "No," I admitted. "But I know I'm not walking away because it might be difficult." The words surprised even me with their certainty. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. When she walked toward her car, I stayed where I was until her headlights disappeared into the night. Driving home, I realized something had shifted again, not in intensity, but in direction. This was no longer a brief collision of attraction and circumstance. Something steadier had begun to take shape. What I didn't know was that Evelyn had already noticed Sophia's late return the night before, and Evelyn Whitmore believed in patterns. Evelyn never confronted anything directly when she could dismantle it elegantly instead. I understood that about her from childhood. How she corrected posture with compliments, redirected conversations with silk-gloved pressure, removed obstacles without ever appearing responsible for their disappearance. So when she invited me to lunch 3 days after my dinner with Sophia, I knew it wasn't casual. We met at the club overlooking the harbor. White tablecloths, silver flatware, the kind of place where reputations are negotiated between courses. "You seem distracted lately," Evelyn observed as she folded her napkin precisely across her lap. "Busy," I replied evenly. "With what?" "Foundation planning." She tilted her head slightly, studying me over the rim of her glass. "Planning requires focus. I'm focused." "Good," she said smoothly, "because I've decided to expand Sophia's responsibilities." The name landed like a chess piece placed deliberately on the board. I kept my expression neutral. "That seems efficient." "It is," Evelyn agreed. "She's capable, discreet, loyal." There it was again, that word. "I value loyalty," she continued, slicing her salmon with surgical precision, "particularly in my inner circle." "Of course." Her gaze sharpened just slightly. "You've taken an interest in her, not a question." "A personal one?" The air between us thinned. "I'm allowed personal interests," I said calmly. "Yes," she replied, "but personal interests often complicate professional environments." "She doesn't belong to the environment," I said before I could stop myself. Evelyn's lips curved faintly. "Everyone in this household belongs to the environment." The implication was clear. Sophia's position was defined by structure, and structure could be adjusted. When lunch ended, I felt something colder than anxiety settle under my ribs. It wasn't jealousy, it was calculation, and I hated that it came from my own bloodline. That evening, I found Sophia in the small glass conservatory attached to the east wing. She was reviewing foundation proposals, sunlight filtering over her shoulder. "You had lunch with her," she said without looking up. "You knew." "She had me reschedule 3 vendor meetings." I crossed the room and closed the door softly behind me. "What did she say?" "That she appreciates commitment." Sophia finally lifted her eyes to mine. "And that this household rewards loyalty." My jaw tightened. She's positioning. She's protecting her control. Over you? Over everything. The honesty in her voice steadied me more than it alarmed me. I stepped closer. Resting my hands lightly on the edge of the table she stood beside. "You don't have to be careful around me." "I do," she said quietly. Her tone wasn't distant. It was deliberate. "You think she'll punish you?" I said. "I think she'll test me. And I can't afford to fail." The weight of that statement wasn't dramatic. It was grounded in lived reality. I moved closer still, my hand finding the small of her back. She didn't resist. If anything, she leaned in just slightly. "I won't let her hurt you," I said. "You can't control her. I can challenge her." Sophia's hand rose to my chest, resting flat over my heart. Not pushing away, not pulling closer, just there. "Charlotte," she said softly, "I don't want you fighting your stepmother for me like I'm a rebellion. You're not a rebellion. Then what am I?" The answer came easier now. "You're someone I choose." Her breath caught almost imperceptibly. I closed the remaining distance between us, brushing my lips along the curve of her cheek before finding her mouth. The kiss deepened quickly, not reckless, but charged with something firmer than desire. My hands moved along her waist, memorizing the lines of her body beneath the fabric. Her fingers slid into my hair, grounding me in place. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. "You make it hard to stay rational," she murmured. "Good." She smiled faintly at that, but the smile didn't erase the tension tightening beneath it. "I have a meeting with her tomorrow," she said. "Private." I stilled. "For what?" She didn't say. Of course she hadn't. A familiar chill crept into my awareness. The feeling of watching pieces move before you've seen the entire board. "I'll be there," I said. "You won't." "She can't isolate you." "She can," Sophia replied quietly. "And she will." The conservatory suddenly felt less like sanctuary and more like glass. Transparent, exposed. I cupped her face gently, thumb brushing along her jaw. "Whatever she's planning, we handle it together." She searched my face, measuring conviction. "I need you steady," she said. "I am." But even as I said it, I felt the first real tremor beneath the surface. Because Evelyn Whitmore didn't confront directly. She reshaped circumstances until resistance felt impossible. And I had just given her something worth reshaping. The morning of Sophia's private meeting with Evelyn arrived wrapped in unnatural calm. The estate looked exactly as it always did. Trimmed hedges, polished floors, sunlight stretching across marble like it had never touched conflict before. But beneath the stillness, I felt tension moving like an undercurrent. Sophia had texted me at 8. "It's at 10. Don't interfere." I stared at the message longer than necessary. Not interfere. I was used to influence, to stepping into rooms when something didn't feel right. I wasn't used to being told to stay out of it, especially when the risk wasn't mine alone. By 9:30, I was pacing the library. I told myself I respected her independence, that she didn't need rescuing, that this wasn't a fairy tale where I barged in and declared loyalty. But restraint has never been my strength. At 10 precisely, Evelyn's office door closed. I could see the hallway from the staircase landing. I stood there under the pretense of reviewing a shipment schedule, my pulse louder than the silence around me. 20 minutes passed. 30. When the door finally opened, Sophia stepped out first. Her posture was perfect, too perfect. Evelyn followed a second later, expression smooth as polished glass. "Charlotte," she said lightly, as if surprised to see me. "You're early." "For what?" I asked evenly. "For tomorrow's donor briefing." I looked at Sophia. She didn't meet my eyes. "I'll be in the East Wing," she said calmly before walking away. Evelyn's gaze tracked her departure. "She's ambitious," Evelyn said quietly. "That can be useful, or dangerous." "What did you say to her?" Evelyn adjusted a stack of folders without answering immediately. "I offered her advancement." My stomach tightened. "On what condition?" "That she maintained professional boundaries." There it was. "You threatened her position." "I clarified expectations," Evelyn corrected. "This household requires discipline." "And if she doesn't comply?" Evelyn's lips curved faintly. "Then she may discover she prefers opportunities elsewhere." The elegance of the threat almost impressed me. "You underestimate me," I said. "No," she replied softly. "I understand you better than you understand yourself." I left before my temper betrayed me. I found Sophia in the back garden near the fountain, hands clasped in front of her as if holding something fragile in place. "What did she offer?" I asked. "A promotion, higher salary, long-term contract, and stability." The word landed heavy. "At the cost of us," I said. She didn't say that directly. She didn't need to. Sophia turned to face me fully. Her composure had cracks now, small, controlled ones. She asked me if I intended to remain impartial. She said, "If I could guarantee my focus wouldn't be compromised by personal entanglements." "Entanglements," I repeated, the word tasting wrong. I told her I'm professional. "And are you?" Her eyes lifted to mine, steady, but conflicted. "I don't want to lose what I've built," she said quietly. "I don't want you to. And I don't want to lose you either." The admission hit deeper than any kiss had. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us beneath the cover of ivy and stone. My hand slid to her waist, firm, but not urgent. "You won't lose either," I said. "You don't know that." "I'll confront her." "That's exactly what she expects," Sophia replied. The truth stilled me. "She wants you reactive," she continued. "She wants this to look impulsive." "So what do you suggest?" I asked. She hesitated, then placed her hands against my chest again. The gesture grounding, intimate without spectacle. "We don't hide," she said, "but we don't provoke." That sounds like strategy. It is. Her fingers curled slightly into the fabric of my shirt. "And if she escalates?" I asked. "Then we adapt." I leaned down, pressing my lips to hers, slower than before, deliberate, not stolen, not rushed. My hands moved along her back, tracing the line of her spine, feeling the subtle tension still lingering there. She responded immediately, mouth warm and sure against mine. This kiss wasn't about rebellion. It was reassurance. When I deepened it, she exhaled softly against my lips, hands sliding up into my hair. I felt the shift again, not just desire, but alignment. "I'm not stepping away," I murmured against her mouth. "I know. And I'm not treating you like leverage." "I know that too." Her forehead rested against mine. For a moment, the estate disappeared. There were no boardrooms, no inheritance structures, no strategic offers, just breath, skin, choice. Then reality returned with the faint sound of footsteps in the distance. Sophia stepped back first. "We move carefully," she said. I nodded, but as she walked away toward the east wing, I felt something else settle inside me. Not fear. Resolve. Evelyn believed she was shaping the board. What she didn't understand yet was that I wasn't playing for advantage. I was playing for something she'd never valued. The shift didn't happen overnight. It unfolded in subtle recalibrations. A delayed vendor approval here, a revised reporting structure there. Evelyn never made dramatic moves. She made incremental ones that accumulated weight. By the following week, Sophia's responsibilities had doubled. She was pulled into early morning briefings, added to budget reviews she'd never previously attended, assigned oversight of 2 separate foundation subcommittees. On paper, it looked like recognition. In practice, it was containment. "She's keeping you too busy," I said one evening, as we stood in my Boston apartment kitchen, the city skyline flickering beyond the windows. Sophia leaned against the counter, sleeves rolled up, a glass of wine balanced between her fingers. "She's testing endurance. She's isolating you. She's measuring discipline." I stepped closer, setting my own glass down. "You don't have to prove anything to her." "It's not about proving," she said softly. "It's about protecting leverage." The word hung between us. "I don't want to be your liability," she added. "You're not." "Charlotte." Her tone stopped me. "I can't afford to be seen as the woman who compromised structure." I moved in front of her fully, hands sliding to her hips. "You didn't compromise anything." She studied my face, searching for ego, maybe for recklessness. "I care about you," I said plainly. The simplicity of it made the room feel smaller. She inhaled slowly. "You don't say things lightly." "No." Her hand came up to trace the line of my jaw. The touch was slower than usual, thoughtful. "This isn't convenient," she said. "It's not supposed to be." The kiss that followed felt different from the ones in corridors or gardens. There were no walls listening, no footsteps waiting, just space. I lifted her slightly, guiding her back against the kitchen counter. She didn't resist. Her hands moved into my hair, pulling me closer, the pressure deepening the kiss until breath became uneven. My fingers slid beneath the hem of her sweater, tracing warm skin at her waist. She shivered, not from cold. "Charlotte," she murmured against my mouth, not warning, just awareness. I slowed, not stopping, but shifting from urgency to exploration. My lips moved along her jaw, down the side of her neck. I felt her pulse quicken beneath my mouth. Her fingers tightened in my hair. This wasn't rebellion. This was intimacy unfolding without spectators. When I looked up at her eyes were darker, softer. "Stay tonight," I said quietly. She hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because she weighed everything. "I'll leave before morning," she replied. The compromise made sense, and I hated that it did. Later, when we lay tangled beneath white sheets, the city hummed low beyond the glass. I realized how different this felt from anything I'd allowed before. Sophia didn't treat me like inheritance. She didn't orbit my wealth or challenge it for sport. She met me directly. Her hand rested on my chest, fingers tracing absent patterns against my skin. "You're thinking," she murmured. "Always." "About her?" "About us." She shifted slightly, propping herself up on one elbow. "We can't outrun her influence." "I'm not trying to outrun it." "Then what are you doing?" I looked at her, at the strength in her posture even here, at the independence that had drawn me in from the beginning. "I'm choosing you in full view," I said. Her brows lifted faintly. "That's not a small decision," she replied. "I don't make small ones." The honesty in that wasn't bravado. It was recognition of who I'd always been, careful, strategic, slow to attach. And yet here I was, dismantling that instinct. She leaned down, pressing a slow kiss to my mouth, unhurried, grounding. "I won't ask you to burn bridges," she said quietly. "I won't. But I won't be hidden either. You won't be." Silence settled around us, warm rather than tense. The next morning, she left before sunrise. By noon, the first ripple appeared. An article in a society column. Nothing explicit, just a mention that I'd been spotted frequently in conversation with a member of the Whitmore administrative staff. The wording was polite. The implication was not. Evelyn hadn't confronted. She'd adjusted narrative. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed with 2 discreet inquiries from board members asking whether boundaries were being maintained. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drove back to Newport. If Evelyn wanted this to become optics, I would decide how the optics looked. When I entered the estate, the air felt charged with quiet observation. Sophia met my gaze from across the main hall. She had seen the article too, and now the shift wasn't subtle anymore. It was public. The article was elegant in its cruelty. No names, no accusations. Just phrasing sharp enough to plant suspicion. Charlotte Whitmore seen in extended private exchanges with a senior administrative associate from within the Whitmore estate. That was all it took. In our world, hierarchy was oxygen. Crossing it created fire. When I walked into the main hall that afternoon, I felt eyes shift toward me, staff pretending not to notice, assistants pretending not to listen. Evelyn stood near the grand staircase, speaking softly with a board member. She glanced at me briefly, expression unreadable, then returned to her conversation. Sophia stood near the long entry table reviewing shipment manifests. Professional, composed, untouched. But I knew her well enough now to see the tension in her shoulders. I didn't approach her immediately. Instead, I crossed the hall deliberately and greeted the board member myself. I spoke clearly, easily, with the same steadiness I'd always carried. I did not rush. I did not explain. Then I walked to Sophia. "Conference room," I said quietly. She followed without question. Once inside, the door closed behind us, muffling the hum of observation outside. "They're escalating," she said first. "She is," I corrected. Sophia folded her arms loosely. "This is what I warned you about. I'm not retreating." "This isn't about retreating," she said softly. "It's about damage." "To whom?" "To the Foundation, to your position, to my credibility." I stepped closer. "You didn't create this." "No," she agreed, "but I'm at the center of it." Her composure was intact, but I could see the fatigue underneath it. The awareness that stability could evaporate under enough scrutiny. "I'll address the board," I said. "Charlotte, they don't get to speculate." "They will," she replied. "That's how this works." Her voice wasn't panicked. It was steady. And that steadiness made the situation feel more serious than anger would have. I reached for her hands, pulling them gently away from where she'd crossed them defensively. "Look at me." She did. "You think I'm afraid of them?" "No," she said honestly. "I think you underestimate how strategic your stepmother can be." I exhaled slowly. Then I adjust. "How?" I held her gaze. "By not allowing this to look like secrecy." Her eyes flickered slightly. "You want to make this public," she said. "I want to remove her leverage." Sophia studied me for a long moment. "That changes everything." It was always going to. Silence settled. Heavy, but not hostile. "If you do that," she said finally, "there's no reversing it. I don't want to reverse it." She searched my face for hesitation and found none. The tension between us shifted from fear to inevitability. I stepped closer, my hand sliding to her waist. Not urgent, not desperate, grounded. "I don't want you positioned as scandal," I said quietly. "I want you positioned as choice." Her breath caught faintly. "That's not a small move," she replied. "Neither is what we're building." The air between us tightened, not from secrecy this time, but from decision. I kissed her slowly, deliberately. No rush. No stolen edges. My hands traced along her back, pulling her close until her body aligned with mine. She responded without hesitation, fingers sliding into my hair, deepening the kiss with quiet certainty. When we separated, her forehead rested against mine. "You're sure?" she asked softly. Yes. Her thumb brushed along my jaw, thoughtful. I won't be used as a statement, she said. You won't. I won't be protected like something fragile. You're not. Her lips curved slightly at that. Then we do this clean, she said. We do it clean. That evening, I requested a meeting with the board, not defensive, not reactive, direct. When the group assembled the next afternoon in the formal drawing room, Evelyn sat at the head of the table as she always did. Polished, controlled. I remained standing. I'm aware of the speculation circulating, I began evenly. Let me clarify something. My personal relationships do not compromise the integrity of this foundation. If anything, they reflect the values of transparency and autonomy we claim to uphold. Evelyn's gaze sharpened subtly. I am seeing someone, I continued, and I do not intend to treat it as impropriety. Silence spread across the room. I didn't look at Sophia, who sat near the far end, posture impeccable, but I felt her presence steady behind me. Evelyn folded her hands lightly. Charlotte, she said smoothly, public perception requires care. I agree, I replied calmly, which is why I'm handling it openly. A flicker passed through her expression. Small, precise. Control shifting. After the meeting dispersed, Sophia met me in the hall outside. That was decisive, she said. It was necessary. You've made it harder for her. I've made it clearer. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You just changed the terms. I reached for her hand openly this time. In the center of the hall, under the gaze of portraits and passing staff. I did. She didn't pull away. And for the first time since the gala, the tension between us felt less like something hidden and more like something chosen. But Evelyn Whitmore never conceded without recalculating, and I could already feel the next move forming. The silence after my declaration didn't explode. It crystallized. That was Evelyn's talent. She didn't counter immediately. She absorbed, reframed, redirected. Within 48 hours, a new internal memo circulated restructuring reporting lines. Sophia would now answer directly to a subcommittee chair, not Evelyn, to ensure transparency. On paper, it looked like compliance. In practice, it was displacement. They're isolating you from me, I said as we walked along the gravel path behind the estate one late afternoon. The ocean wind cut sharp across the cliffs, but the air between us was warmer than it had been in weeks. No, Sophia corrected gently. They're isolating me from control. You think this is compromise? I think it's repositioning. She stopped walking and turned toward me, hair lifting in the wind. The gray sea behind her made her look impossibly steady. You forced visibility, she said. Now she's adjusting optics. I expected retaliation. This isn't retaliation, she replied. It's strategy. Her calm steadied me more than anger would have. You're not angry, I observed. I am, she said, but anger without direction is useless. I stepped closer, sliding my hands into the pockets of her coat, pulling her slightly toward me. You sound like her. She smiled faintly. I learned from her. The admission didn't sting the way I thought it might. Instead, it reminded me of something essential. Sophia hadn't survived in our world by accident. She had studied it. I don't want you reshaped by this place, I said quietly. I won't be. You're certain? She lifted her hand and rested it against my chest, over my heart. The gesture familiar now, grounding. I chose you, she said softly. Not the structure. The simplicity of it hit deeper than my public statement had. I leaned down and kissed her, slower this time, less about urgency and more about anchoring. Her hand slid around my waist beneath my coat, pulling me closer against the wind. When we broke apart, her lips brushed mine again, not because we needed more, but because neither of us was done. You're smiling, she murmured. So are you. We stayed there longer than we should have. Not hiding, not flaunting, just existing. That night, however, the next move revealed itself. An invitation arrived. Private dinner, hosted by Evelyn. Board members present. +1 optional. Optional. The word carried more weight than it appeared to. Sophia stood in my apartment reading the message over my shoulder. She wants to test reaction, she said quietly. She wants to test us, I replied. Will you bring me? The question wasn't insecurity. It was assessment. Yes. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then we don't arrive uncertain. I won't. Dinner unfolded under candlelight and inherited crystal. The table was smaller than Gala scale, but no less strategic. Conversation drifted through market projections and philanthropic pledges. No one mentioned the memo, no one mentioned the article, but I felt it. The quiet attention, the evaluation. When I reached for Sophia's hand beneath the tablecloth, I didn't do it subtly. My thumb brushed over her knuckles in full view of anyone observant enough to notice. Evelyn noticed. She did not react. Midway through the second course, she addressed Sophia directly. You've adapted quickly to your expanded responsibilities, Evelyn said smoothly. Thank you, Sophia replied evenly. I value resilience. I value clarity, Sophia responded, just as evenly. A faint pause followed. Evelyn's smile sharpened almost imperceptibly. And are you clear about your priorities? She asked. The room stilled. Sophia did not look at me before answering. Yes. Evelyn inclined her head slightly. Good. No accusations, no threats, just acknowledgement. After dessert, as guests filtered out into the entry hall, Evelyn approached me privately. You've made your stance known, she said quietly. I have. You understand that loyalty shapes legacy. I understand that control isn't the same thing. Her gaze cooled slightly. She will always be vulnerable to perception, Evelyn said. You won't. That's exactly why I won't let her stand alone in it. For the first time, something shifted behind Evelyn's composure. Not anger. Calculation altered. She stepped back. The conversation concluded without escalation. When Sophia and I left the estate that night, the air felt different, lighter. Not because the conflict was over, but because the ground beneath it had changed. As we drove away from Newport, her hand rested in mine on the center console. You didn't waver, she said softly. Neither did you. She leaned over and pressed a slow kiss to my jaw while I kept my eyes on the road. The tension wasn't gone, but it was no longer hidden, and for the first time since the gala, I felt something stronger than defiance. I felt equilibrium. The shift didn't happen in a dramatic collapse of chandeliers or a scandalous headline splashed across society pages. It happened quietly, the way real power changes hands. 2 weeks after the private dinner, the foundation announced a restructuring, not a demotion, not a dismissal, a redistribution of oversight to modernize operational clarity. Sophia's new role placed her beyond Evelyn's direct authority and into a cross-board advisory position tied to community expansion initiatives. It was a lateral move disguised as progress, and it was the first time I had seen Evelyn concede without openly losing. You negotiated, I said to Sophia when she showed me the revised contract in my Boston apartment. No, she corrected. I positioned. Her tone wasn't triumphant, it was calm. Evelyn had realized something important. Removing Sophia now would confirm weakness, elevating her diluted suspicion. Strategy had turned into equilibrium. Are you satisfied? I asked. Sophia folded the document and set it aside. I'm stable. That's not the same thing. Her eyes lifted to mine. Stability is power. I moved toward her slowly, resting my hands at her waist. And us? She searched my face for doubt and found none. Us is not dependent on a contract, she said. The truth in that steadied something inside me that had been bracing for impact since the gala. Weeks earlier, I had believed the most dangerous part of loving her would be exposure. I was wrong. The most dangerous part had been transformation. I no longer attended events because I was expected to. I attended because I chose to represent something different. I no longer spoke carefully to preserve reputation. I spoke clearly to define it. At the next public fundraiser, smaller than the gala but no less observed, I didn't wait for whispers. I introduced her myself. This is Sophia, I said simply when donors approached. No qualifier, no apology, just presence. And she stood beside me, not behind, not slightly removed, beside. Later that night, after the guests had filtered out and the estate lights dimmed, we walked through the now empty ballroom. The chandeliers glowed softly overhead. "This is where it started," I said. She looked around slowly. "You thought I was a guest. I thought you were untouchable." She smiled faintly. "I wasn't." I stepped closer, brushing my fingers along her jaw. "You were," I said quietly. "Just not in the way I understood." The kiss that followed wasn't urgent. It was earned. Her hand slid around my waist, pulling me into the space beneath the chandelier where we'd first noticed each other. The world felt smaller, quieter. No board members, no staff, no stepmother measuring air. Just us. "You don't regret it?" she asked softly against my mouth. "Not once." She kissed me again, slower, deeper. Her fingers threading through my hair the way they had in the garden weeks ago, but without the shadow of secrecy. When we finally parted, she rested her forehead against mine. "You changed," she said. "I chose." "That's not the same thing." "It is for me." She studied me in the low light, not assessing, not protecting. "Seeing. I won't ever be hidden," she said quietly. "You won't. I won't be managed. You never were." A small breath escaped her, almost a laugh. Outside, the ocean wind pressed gently against the tall windows. The estate no longer felt like a structure designed to contain me. It felt like a place I could walk through without shrinking. Evelyn remained strategic. She always would be. But she had recalculated, not because I fought her, because I didn't. I removed the leverage, and in doing so, I removed her power over the only thing that mattered. Sophia took my hand as we walked toward the exit. No audience, no declaration, just continuity. The night I met her, I believed something irreversible had happened under chandeliers. I was right. But it wasn't scandal. It was alignment. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't performing inheritance.